It is a world of heroes, swords, and magic, the continent of heroes. At this very moment, there is a war of incredible proportions taking place here, involving all nations, races, and species of living beings. This war was started by a demon queen hoping to destroy all living beings and conquer the entire world. Launching their invasion by surprise and with incredible power, the demon army, supported by the power of their queen, was so strong that no one could stop their attacks. They passed through the empires of various races and creatures like a knife through butter, leaving behind only death, ruins, and smoke from burned cities. Mighty warriors, mages, and heroes of various races tried to stop them, but their strength was miserable compared to the demon queen. Very soon, only the human race survived and continued to resist, no matter what. And so the demon queen gathered her army of horrible and repulsive creatures, demons, for the last battle that separated her from dominating this world. But the human empire, due to constant internal quarrels and rebellions, was not fully prepared for the last battle, so after the first defeats, their empire crumbled just like their defense. They helplessly surrendered, forgetting their fallen heroes who stood in their defense. As soon as the human empire fell, the demon queen, by the way, her name was Elizabeth, proclaimed herself as the sole and undisputed ruler of this world. Having covered the whole world with her ominous shadow, she did not want to stop and continued to cherish her evil plans known only to her. Meanwhile, the capital of the human empire is being defeated by an army of demons. Surrounded by the ruins of the once incredible palace and the bodies of the last defenders of this citadel, the High Mage looked at the ruins in despair in the presence of the prince. In the throne room, the High Magician Barrow began to make his last speech, in which he assured that in the future a hero would surely appear who would defeat and destroy the demon Queen Elizabeth, as it was described in ancient legends. He was putting all the despair and rage that he was feeling at what he was seeing around him into it. However, suddenly he fell to the ground from the prince's blow. Taken by surprise by this betrayal, he had no time to do anything. He could only guess at the prince's motives and goals. Prince Vis Malfoy leaned over the defeated teacher and mentor, with a seemingly good-natured face, but his words were pure poison. He said that he should take Her Majesty's orders seriously and that no one was interested in his opinion at all, he was only given orders that he should immediately obey. The Supreme Magus could not even move and only lay helplessly at the traitor's feet. Gathering the remnants of his strength, he shouted in his face everything he thought about him, the traitor of the human race. How he regretted that he had not seen this in him earlier and mistakenly hoped to raise him into the hero promised in ancient legends who would save them from demons. Hearing his words, the prince went mad with rage and, unable to contain his anger, was going to finish the job he had started. The rage and hatred that filled him released his true demonic nature. And when he was about to end it all with words of contempt for his teacher and his father, who had long since died, a voice rang out, a voice of such power that the prince instantly stopped a moment before the end. It was Elizabeth herself. She had other goals for him and death would have been too easy for him to participate in. The prince was forced to stop an inch from his goal. And despite all his desire, he could not finish what he had started. The order of his mistress was so strong. Elizabeth wanted to know more about this prophecy. She wondered if it was really possible that in the future one of these weak and insignificant people would be able to challenge her. It should have been interesting and fun. After all these years of war she had never met a single opponent worthy of her. However, she did not show it outwardly. She just said with contempt, "Worthless man, you'd better explain what you mean, otherwise." She knows 1,000 ways to make a person suffer a fate worse than death. And looking into those red eyes, there was no doubt about it. Then the frightened magician began to shout that the prophecy said that the promised hero must come and only he could pull the holy sword out of the stone. And the day he pulls the sword out, the power of demons over people will come to an end. This holy sword is stuck in a stone platform in the main hall. But then he stopped and assured her that he would never tell her again. And he would never betray the human race. But it turned out that just one look from Elizabeth was enough for him to give her all the information she needed. And in a moment, the platform with the sword emerged from the secret hiding place. It was the holy sword, Alpha, or the first, the sword of myths and legends, which defeated countless enemies. Looking at it, Elizabeth wondered if this legend was true and if the one who would draw it would really have the power and the right to challenge her. Or maybe it was just another nonsense from pathetic people. However, when she touched the hilt of the sword, she felt its considerable power and potential. Immersed in her thoughts, she walked toward the throne. Out loud she said, "How interesting." As she approached the throne, with a subtle smile and a twinkle in her eye, she said that she would wait here on the throne until the hero arrived. Thus began the reign of the Demon Queen over all the races and peoples of this world. In the first year, countless guards of demons and traitors stood at the gates of her throne room to keep all her subjects in fear and obedience. But after a year, no one dared to rebel, and the guards became fewer. Then even fewer. By the fourth year, only a few guards remained on duty. In the fifth year, no one guarded the queen's throne room at all. Over time, the seemingly cruel rule of the Demon Queen became familiar to the inhabitants of this world, and life and prosperity began to return to cities throughout the continent of heroes. Bustling commerce filled the streets and creatures of all kinds hurried about their business. Demons, elves, beastmen, gnomes, humans, everyone had a place in this world. Under the leadership of the Demon Queen, all past disputes and hostility between the races disappeared. Everyone had equal opportunities and no one had an advantage over others. Without disputes and claims against each other, everyone was finally able to live in peace and harmony with others. Very quickly, the continent of heroes began to prosper and grow rich under the seemingly ruthless rule of the Demon Queen. Because of this, many began to worry and fear the return of the hero, which could destroy the fragile peace. Therefore, an anti-heroic alliance was formed to prevent the return of the promised hero. Elizabeth sat on the throne of the demonic empire, receiving envoys from different races and from remote corners of her empire. The throne room had been restored and was meant to emphasize the queen's power. The only reason for the guests was a single question: so, is there any news of the promised hero? The first to speak are the representatives of the elves and dwarves. Twilia, the chancellor of the elven race, assures them that they have already engaged all the wood insects in the search, but have found absolutely nothing about the promised hero. Heimerdinger, the chancellor of the dwarf race, said that they dwarves are not very good at collecting information, but they have collected information from all the weapon shops, and according to this research there is no one suspicious. Then the representative of the humans, Aristotle, spoke, and he said smugly and proudly that he believed that even if the promised hero did appear, he would not be able to stand up to all of us. We didn't have to worry about him at all. The next to speak was the demon chancellor, Jim, who could hardly hide his anger, and immediately said, in response to Aristotle's words, that he might not know because he had only recently joined, but that Her Majesty was not afraid of the promised hero. On the contrary, she really wants him to come. He also whispered that the queen had collected all kinds of ancient books on magic and martial arts to study. At the same time, with a reverent whisper, the Beastman Chancellor added that Her Majesty could destroy the continent of heroes in a matter of seconds. The elf exclaimed that it was all the fault of the idiot Barrows. What prophecy? That's just nonsense. That with Her Majesty they could just let the promised hero die. At the same time, a noise began to come from the doorway, and a clumsy old man entered the room shouting, "Cancel the hero, cancel the hero." Heimerdinger only tiredly noted that as soon as someone starts talking about Barrow, he immediately appears, as in the famous saying. Wearing a loose shirt and pink underpants, Barrow Smith moved around the room, shouting loudly. Once a high magician and priest of the human race, he was now the president of the Demon Queen's fan club and the Association Against the Promised Hero. Once the pride of the human race and a model of behavior and dignity, he had become a henchman and a petty sycophant of the Demon Queen. Just one snap of Elizabeth's fingers and incredible magical power is released from her hand. This stream of magic, like a huge hand, picks up the unfortunate magician and priest, knocking the breath out of him and all the junk he brought with him. Pulling him to her, Elizabeth asks him with a seemingly sweet smile, "Where is the promised hero?" Scared to death, squeezed by an incredible force, he begins to make a lame excuse. That the prophecy might not be accurate or even true at all. Especially if the purpose of the prophecy is not at all what was expected. Like, for example, her unsurpassed majesty. Their sweet conversation was interrupted by the young prince, who said with all his graciousness that the old priest was right. That it was a great insult to believe in this stupid prophecy and apply it to her majesty. This unfortunate priest had recently found something that allowed him to say that. But before he could finish, he received a powerful slap from the queen that knocked him out. She didn't even look in his direction and just threw him over her shoulder with contempt. "Get lost, you bum." As soon as he came to his senses, he could only say that he completely agreed with this and realized his pitifulness. The irritated queen called the priest a pile of garbage and threw him across the hall into the wall. With a distinctive sound, he crashed into it halfway through his body, leaving only the edge of his robe and ridiculous pink underwear outside. An expected fate for such a jester. Elizabeth, with a determined expression on her face and straightening up to her full height, began to say that she was the ruler of everything and had reached the top of this world. She held the power of the whole world in her hands. She is waiting for a legendary hero who will be able to challenge her and will finally be able to entertain her. And then he will be just a stepping stone to her even greater glory. She studied all the ancient magic books of the hero continent and after endless attempts was able to create doomsday magic to be ready for the hero's test. And she began to approach the sword she had been contemplating for the past 15 years. The sword, like Excalibur, was illuminated by the rays of the sun, exquisitely decorated with gold and precious stones. The queen continued to approach the sword wondering, why is the hero nowhere to be seen, where is he? She continued to stare at the sword with concentration. And there it was at arm's length, so shiny and beautiful and at the same time powerful and deadly. So, since the hero does not go to Elizabeth, she will come to him. And she took the hilt of the sword with a stone expression full of determination that her subjects had not seen for a long time. As soon as everyone in the room realized what their queen was going to do, they were filled with fear and bewilderment. They all wondered how she dared to do this. They immediately started shouting at her to stop. But their opinion was worthless to her, so she gripped the hilt of her sword with all her strength and tenacity. And with the words, "I am coming to you," she began to pull it. The whole hall was filled with flashes of energy coming from the queen. But even with such power she could not do it all at once, but she continued to pull with all the strength she had. Sweat began to drip down her terrible and beautiful face. The expression of maximum tension was frozen on her face. It was a scary and dangerous sight. The wind and lightning of pure energy began to demolish everything around. None of those present in the throne room could stand on their feet, and only the timely reaction of the demon chancellor saved the others from danger. He created magical shields that protected everyone else, except for the talentless priest, who was flying around the hall with a part of the wall. There was no limit to their amazement. Would the demon queen pull out the holy sword? A whirlwind of incredible energy pierced the ceiling of the palace like paper and flew into the sky. What could have caused this? Finally, the demon queen drew the holy sword, and when the smoke cleared, Elizabeth appeared before everyone, sword in hand. With a mockery she asked, "Who said that only a legendary hero could pull out this sword?" She was about to throw it away as another piece of trash, when suddenly images of the countryside began to appear before her eyes, mountains, a valley, and then a lonely house. It was not very clear, but it was enough for her to realize where the legendary promised hero was hiding. With the satisfied smile of a predator who has stalked its prey, Elizabeth said, "Yes, this is where you are hiding." Raising her hand, she began to prepare a spell of displacement. And now, enveloped in the glow of symbols and words in an ancient and long-forgotten language, she was going to arrive immediately at that unfortunate hero. The sycophantic prince tried to go with the queen, asking her to allow him to continue serving her. And when he almost reached her, with a puff of smoke, the queen disappeared, leaving only one bright red hair in his hand. He could only breathe out, "My teacher, Elizabeth." And he remained standing there, confused, with his hand outstretched. Meanwhile, in the village of newcomers, in a valley among the impregnable mountains, somewhere on the outskirts of the continent of heroes, a young peasant is working hard in the field under the scorching sun. Even a large straw hat does not help him escape the heat, and he is forced to wipe the sweat from his face with a handkerchief. This is the legendary hero. He works quietly in the field and is completely satisfied with his life. He does not even realize what fate awaits him ahead. Let's take a closer look at his story. It turns out that he is not from this world. His name is Li Ping, and he was an ordinary office worker. He lived an ordinary and boring life, didn't like to play games or watch anime. His only pleasure was watching his favorite short videos on his way to work on public transportation. These were short videos about farming. They talked about different tips for fertilizing the soil for different types of plants, as well as processing the harvested crops into ready-to-eat meals. He also liked videos about animal care. In other words, he loved everything about agriculture and such a simple, carefree life. He was so jealous of those who made these videos. He wanted to live the same life so badly. He had dreamed about it so many times, but one day something was different. Suddenly, everything around him disappeared. And only the strap of the transport remained in his hand. A new world was already surrounding him, with a flock of dragons in the air, flying majestically by. Different air, different sky, different mountains, everything new. And then Li realized that this was not a dream, not a vision. He was frightened and confused. How could this have happened to him? As time went on, under the guidance of the novice system, he slowly learned the basic skills of survival in this world. In fact, at first he knew nothing about this completely different world, but it did not scare him at all. After all, this was the simple farming life he wanted so much. Li felt his strength and health had improved compared to his life in the previous world. However, after a while, an information window appeared with the following message: "Dear player, after this period of rookie training, you have fully fulfilled the conditions necessary to leave the rookie village. Please start your adventure." But our hero was so pleased with how things were going that he wondered why he had to leave. He was so happy here, what else did he need for a happy life? Then the next message appeared, emphasizing that after he leaves the newcomer village, he will meet all kinds of people and creatures in this world. He would be able to learn a variety of sword and magic skills, and perhaps become a legendary hero who could defeat the demon queen who had taken over the world. And then he was asked to start the adventure again. But the hero did not give up easily and still did not want to start the adventure. He explained that he did not want to kill any demon queen. He insisted that he just wanted to continue living here in the village of newcomers. The information windows began to bother him more and more, urging him to leave the newcomer village. They asked him to go fulfill his mission to kill the demon king and start his adventure. Then they began to convince him that the later he left the newbie village, the stronger the demon king would be. That learning sword and magic skills would allow the legendary hero to get treasures and all kinds of interesting encounters. Then the system simply required him to start the adventure. Over and over again. The system kept telling him to leave the newbie village and start the adventure, but it seemed that there was nothing the system could do to him except give him messages and couldn't force him to leave. Li decided that he could go to hell with this demon king. He just wanted to stay here and live like this forever. There is something that makes the newcomer village special. It's a special time barrier that completely hides the newbie village and keeps it safe. Inside this barrier, one day lasts much longer than 24 hours. And this allows you to do much more inside the barrier than outside it. Our hero Li Ping used this time to hone his farming skills to perfection. He gained a lot of experience and increased his physical strength. He also went hunting in the forest, where he became a master of archery and agile movement. He learned to be as quiet and invisible as a shadow. He became a master at making objects. He spent a lot of time in meditation and reflection, increasing his spiritual power. He still didn't know anything about swords and magic, but it didn't matter to him because he wasn't going out on an adventure. He traded the points he got from the newbie tasks to slowly build his perfect house out of junk. This went on until one day, when suddenly, the barrier surrounding the village exploded, leaving one last angry message for Li: "How stupid, in this world of sword and magic, where you can do whatever you want and become whatever you want. All you do every day is farm, completely ignoring my advice. You're not a legendary hero at all. You only know how to get newbie points and exchange them for maintenance tools. You don't want to learn any skills with a sword or magic at all. You're not interested in my adventure help features at all. I hate it. I hate you. I hope you die soon by the hand of the Demon King. The system disappeared, leaving no trace behind. Our hero just exhaled a sigh of relief. He thought that finally there would be no more annoying notifications. And everyone would leave him alone. After a hard day's work in the field, he felt hungry and decided to make himself dinner. But he noticed that he was running out of firewood and decided to chop some more. As he approached the log to chop the wood, he remembered that he hadn't brought his special axe with him. He had left it in the woods when he chopped wood in the morning. Suddenly, the sky was covered with clouds and countless lightning bolts appeared among them. A strong wind rose. Lee looked up, not understanding what was happening. It was the first time he had ever seen anything like this. Frightened and confused, he said, "Not now." Elizabeth appeared from the sky, surrounded by lightning. It was a spectacular appearance. Satisfied that she had finally found this unfortunate legendary hero, she smiled to herself, hoping for fun ahead. But all her hopes were dashed in a moment and she looked in amazement at what was happening on the ground. Our legendary hero ran as fast as he could to his house. But the reason for this was not Elizabeth, whom he did not even notice, but the clouds with rain that Lee noticed, and he was worried about his belongings and fish that were drying in the open air. Elizabeth could only guess why he was running. Is he really the legendary hero promised in the prophecies? Why is he so insignificant? Lee breathed a sigh of relief, glad to have managed to save his belongings and dried fish and sausages from the rain. His robodog companion, Wang Kai, was not as calm and happy as his master. He started barking at the clouds, anticipating trouble. But Lee did not understand what was happening at all. He thought his dog was afraid of the rain and thunderstorm. He began to calm him down, trying to explain to him that it was about to rain and they had to go home. But Wang Kai would not calm down. And when Lee was about to leave him here and go inside himself, the dog began to disturb him and bark at him. Then even our stiff-necked man began to realize that something was wrong. And he finally looked up at the sky. Finally, he saw a strange silhouette against the clouds. It was strangely shaped. And Lee asked his robot dog what that thing was in the sky. The dog kept barking. Elizabeth looked at Lee as if he were a complete idiot. How could he be so stupid as to compare her to anything? As soon as Lee heard her voice, he immediately began to apologize for not seeing her clearly earlier. However, he was overwhelmed with questions that he couldn't say out loud. Why would someone out of the blue want to join? Shouldn't a village of newcomers be completely safe? Elizabeth said with a murderous look on her face, "Let's check it out first." She began to prepare a spell. Before Lee could even ask what she was talking about, an object was rapidly flying at him. All he could do was to shield himself with his hand from imminent death, but Elizabeth was surprised. The fact that he remained alive and unharmed was promising. Instead of piercing him, the sword began to make a circle around him. And then it lay right in his hand, ready to fight. Lee was as shocked as Elizabeth. How did he do that? He immediately struck a heroic pose and swung his sword. But it was all instinctive. As soon as he realized what was happening, he immediately began to try to throw away the sword, which flew into his hand. Lee was stunned and frightened by what was happening. Elizabeth stated that the recognition of the Holy Sword Alpha could not be wrong. She had finally found the legendary hero. But something was wrong with him. His magical powers were so low that even the ordinary soldiers in her army were outclassed by him. Could he be hiding his true power? This was an unanswered question. Then she introduced herself to Lee, said that her name was Elizabeth and she was the strongest demon queen in history. Today she would completely destroy the last legendary hero. She began to cast a spell of incredible power to destroy this pitiful hero in one attack. And then Lee, scared to death, began to ask himself why the demon queen was here. He hadn't left this place. At the same time, his faithful robodog started barking at the Demon Queen again. Scared even more, Lee tried to calm him down, as he thought he might provoke Elizabeth. With the help of the abyssal magic, the Demon Queen should have simply destroyed this place. 3 huge icons appeared in the sky. Huge meteors began to appear from them, about to destroy everything below. The frightened Lee finally began to realize that perhaps the system was telling him that his meeting with the Demon Queen was inevitable. Even if he didn't leave the newbie village. Then Lee simply threw his sword on the ground and said that he had nothing more to say here then. He just started running to his house without even trying to do anything else. His reasoning was as follows: so I'm a rookie nub, but the final boss has come to my door, so what can I do but accept my fate? And he headed for his door without a care in the world. Leaving his faithful dog, the robot, to take care of business. As he stood at the door, Lee reflected that perhaps he should even be grateful for this fate. As he entered the house, he knew he had nothing to regret, he had spent so much happy time here. In the end, he just wanted to go back to zero with this house. And he just locked himself in his house waiting for the fate that Elizabeth had in store for him. The Demon Queen did not understand at all what was going on. Why did he drop his weapon? Why didn't he run away? Why did he lock himself in the house? And what did his stupid smile mean in the end? Was it an ambush from him and he was so strong that he was not afraid of her at all? These thoughts drove Elizabeth crazy. She screamed that he was an incredibly sneaky bastard. She was angrier than ever before. How could it be that someone could turn his back on her like that with a smile on his face? She shouted, "Die," and directed the full power of her magic at this house. Giant stone meteors flew at the little house and nothing seemed to stop them. The robot dog went into combat mode. He began to measure and calculate the strength of the attack in order to respond with enough force to repel it. The 3 giant meteors were flying very fast under the influence of gravity and pushed by the power of magic and seemed to be blurred spots. But Wonkai had completed his calculations in time and was ready to respond. Combat modules with missiles began to transform from its robotic body. And within a second, the robot was fully in combat mode. It was armed with dozens of missiles and other countermeasures to counter threats. It opened fire with all the weapons it had, and thanks to the calculations made, each of its shells hit the target. The first attack was repelled by the efforts of the robot's faithful dog. Elizabeth liked what she saw. The hero from the legends was not so helpless after all. He had such an advanced magic tool in the form of this robotic dog. It must be a legendary battle. But compared to it, this dog was absolutely nothing. And she was going to prove it in battle. She began to prepare an even more powerful spell again. With the help of apocalyptic magic, she was going to destroy this whole piece of the continent. She told the dog that she had lost interest in testing its capabilities and was going to end it here and now. She summoned an incredibly large meteor of pure energy. Wonkai started his calculations again. And as soon as he completed them, he got ready to act. He began to generate a small black hole. Wonkai enlarged it to a certain point. And then he launched it into a huge energy meteor. The Demon Queen saw his attempt, but she was sure that he would not succeed. And so the little black hole of the robot dog fell into this energy ball. Elizabeth smiled to herself, confident that they would be destroyed along with a piece of this earth. But something was wrong. Suddenly, the energy ball began to dissipate without reaching its goal. And then it disappeared without a trace, causing no harm. The Demon Queen was shocked, her apocalyptic magic hadn't worked. How could this be? She did not understand what had happened, her magic was broken. This had never happened before. But one more question was on her mind. What was the hero doing inside the house? She could not even imagine it. And he was just lying in bed, ready to accept his death. Imagining all the happy moments that had been in his life. Surprised, Elizabeth began to descend to the ground. Wonkai continued to bark at her. Elizabeth looked at the robotic dog with curiosity. She wondered what kind of creature he was. Wang Kai was ready for a fight and had the right expression on his face. After a moment of hesitation and reflection, Elizabeth laughed. It was unexpected, but in the end it was she who underestimated her opponent. How ironic. She had decided to finish the job manually, without the help of magic, just using the unreal physical strength she had. Elizabeth spread her wings in preparation for hand-to-hand combat. As she approached the robot dog, she shouted at it not to be too proud of itself, because it had used less than 30% of its strength before. In her true terrifying form, she came at him like a ball of death and fear. The queen was sure that she could show him what real terror was. The poor, frightened dog had no choice but to stay and fight her. A battle of incredible intensity was taking place in the yard of the small house. Meanwhile, our hero had been sleeping peacefully for an hour. He woke up and didn't quite understand what had happened. Was he dead or not? He looked around and he was still in his house. Li was surprised by this turn of events. He got out of bed not believing that he had real ground under his feet. Everything seemed so normal, except for one thing. There was an extraordinary silence outside the house. Li decided to check it out. He went to the door, grabbed the handle and froze. A crazy thought froze his movements. What if this demon queen was waiting for him outside the door like a maniac? He cautiously peered out of the door with fear. Before him was a battlefield, a battle that had just ended. Clouds of dust were everywhere, but they were already beginning to clear. As the dust settled, Li saw Elizabeth holding a mangled Wang Kai. Her claws were crushing his limp head. Li only managed to shout the name of his faithful friend. While the demon queen finally broke the robot dog. Then Elizabeth threw away the broken robot and went to Li. With mock regret, she told him how sorry she was that she had completely destroyed his magical tool, which he was so proud of. As always, the frightened Li tried to reassure her, assuring her that it was nothing to worry about, that she had broken his robot, asking her to calm down and sit down to talk.